instill confidence among residents and stakeholders. So in the Constitution for the city of Oakland is the Oakland City Charter. It empowers the city auditor and the city auditor's office to fulfill those important roles. Specifically, the city charter outlines that the city auditor has the power and the duty to audit departments and agencies of the city, audit areas deemed to be in the best interests of the public, report the results of those audits, and advise and make recommendations to the city administrator. And I might add, not, other entities that are responsible for oversight. So in some cases, those could be commissions, some cases, those could be the city council or the mayor's office. And we have access to all the city records needed to conduct our work. So in other places where I worked, this is something that you couldn't take for granted. The auditor was appointed, and it was a struggle sometimes getting the records that we needed. In Oakland, the city charter empowers us to really do our jobs because we have access to everything. A lot of the fights that my predecessor Courtney Ruby had in her couple of terms of office, we get to enjoy those rights, and it's in the city charter. So this is kind of just a general org chart of all the city departments and commissions. Everybody obviously reports to the residents of Oakland, but the fact that the city auditor is elected is not terribly common. There's only 4 elected city auditors in the state of California. That's important so that we're not influenced by the city administration. We audit what needs to be audited based on our professional judgment and our assessment of the risk of the city. The city council nor the mayor can tell us what to audit, when not to audit, when to audit, when not to audit, and when and how to report our findings. So this is extremely important. The city auditor is completely independent from all those city bureaucratic agencies. Our independence as an office, notwithstanding, the office is still
We just
silence your mic.
Okay, let's.
On Zoom.
Yeah, well, let's see. Well, it already sounds better.
Okay.
This slide is meant to illustrate a bunch of things. First, it's our basis, and so that's the team in the city auditor's office as of right now. So I just talked about the structural independence of the city auditor's office, the city auditor, which is codified in the city charter. The budget and staffing is dependent on the city council. And the mayor and city council approve our budget, and many of you may know that we are in an extreme fiscal emergency. While we did have a city charter amendment passed in November 2022, establishing a minimum staffing of the city auditor's office to 14. We haven't seen it yet. It was we were immediately reduced to 12 due to that extreme fiscal emergency declared by the city council. So we have 12, but as you can see, we also have some vacancies, and those 2 blue ones are frozen. So those were the 2 that we just lost. I've been told as of last week that additional cuts are imminent. So we'll see. I think doing more with less is going to have to be the theme of our office for the foreseeable future. So we just done our strategic plan. Our vision is to achieve an effective, efficient, equitable, ethical, and accountable city government that is data-driven, responsive to the most pressing needs of residents, and supportive of the collective well-being of Oaklanders. So that's the vision. That's like something that's something that we're continuously striving to do, but it's obviously not something that's attainable. But everything that we do should be consistent with that vision. But our mission is in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis, what we can actually measure our success off of is to advocate good government for all Oaklanders by independently and objectively assessing city programs and services, making recommendations to improve them, and publicly reporting the results. So that's what we do in the city auditor's office. And we do that by some very specific work. We do ballot measure analysis. I don't know if you received your packets in the mail yet, where they have there's one this cycle for the special election for the city of Oakland, and it's the appropriations limit. We did the analysis for that, and not the legal analysis. That's the city attorney's office, but we are required by the city charter to do an independent financial analysis where we identify the fiscal impact to the city of Oakland and the financial impact to individual Oaklanders. We also do whistleblower investigations. So I'll get into a little bit of those later. And performance audits, both performance audits that we're required to do based on the city charter and our municipal code, but also those that are risk-based based on our assessment of risks in the city of Oakland. So here are the ballot measures that we've done over the years. The city of Oakland, I just want to say, like, I used to work at the city of San Jose. We never, ever had, I lived in San Jose for over 10 years. I don't remember any kind of measure being brought directly to the voters. But here in Oakland, it feels like every cycle where there's like a new ballot measure, it's really striking. It's not something that happens. But every time one is approved to be brought to the voters, we do our financial analysis, as I just said. And these are just some of them over the years. Those are all on our website too, if you want to see our financial analysis that we did. And we have our whistleblower program. So as I said earlier, I came in on Courtney Ruby's third term as a whistleblower manager. That the whistleblower program dates back to 2009 with Courtney's first term. It seeks to detect and defend against fraud-based abuse. And specifically, about the biggest aspect of the whistleblower program is a whistleblower hotline, which is important because almost half of fraud that's found within organizations is found because somebody has come forward with a complaint. So the whistleblower hotline serves to provide that forum for people to come forward with their concerns. So we have a whistleblower hotline, 23% of the complaints that come in that hotline are from employees, which is great because employees are uniquely situated to see bad things that happen. And here is the information to our whistleblower hotline. So it's for fraud, waste, and abuse. As auditors, we want to hear from people about everything. So even if it's like government not working well, we want to hear about that. But the whistleblower hotline is supposed to be for fraud, waste, or abuse. So like acts of misconduct, like people behaving badly, right? We have this 24-hour hotline, both on phone and then our online reporting submission. It's available in multiple languages. It is set up in such a way, it is hosted by a third party. We don't ever have to hear anyone's voice. We don't ever have to see your IP address. We don't need your email address or anything like that. There's instructions for people to pick usernames and passwords once they submit a whistleblower complaint. And a couple of those bullets are intended for the employees because we use this slide for our new employee orientation, so I'll spare you. But we've made some success through our whistleblower hotline. There's some of the, so we do publish some of our substantiated whistleblower complaints through reports, and here are the examples of some. All these investigation reports are posted online. So in some cases, we did not substantiate fraud, waste, or abuse, but there were recommendations that emerged from our investigation. So we might say no fraud occurred, or we didn't find fraud, we didn't find abuse. But we found some bad things that were not operating as they should be. And so every time we have a recommendation, we publicly report on those recommendations through our investigation reports. So feel free to look those up. I know Carolyn looked some up, and I'd be willing to talk to you about any of those. So our performance audits is the bulk of our work. We're the auditor's office. We do audits. That's the big thing. It's interesting because we're really geeky about investigations and ballot analysis and audits. They're totally different. They have totally different kind of procedures and quality assurance processes. But the public just says, oh, the auditors do the audits, right? But really the performance audit, they call everything an audit. But most of our work really is audits, performance audits. And those are where we're just looking to test for efficiency, effectiveness, economy, equity, compliance with laws and regulations. I kind of previewed that earlier. And we have, they're examples of questions we might be wanting to answer in the performance audit. And they're listed here. Our programs achieving their intended objectives or outcomes. Our services provided efficiently and are equitable. And our legal requirements and rules being. And here, I hate using a lot of words on PowerPoint slides, but this is just meant to show all the performance audits that we've done. I think this dates back to Courtney Ruby's third term. So this is her third and fourth term. Just lots of the risk-based audits, as I said before, are ones that we felt that things are not operating. We have indications that these programs are not working. People are complaining about these things. There was some kind of epic failure. So we put them on an audit plan. The mandated audits are ones that we're required to audit, as I spoke about earlier. Many of those ballot measures that were on that previous slide do require the city auditor's office to audit. And some of them require audits more generally, but they don't specify it's the city auditor's office. For the first time ever, and this is also based on that Measure X that was passed by the voters in November 2022, we've showed our work in terms of providing the public with some transparency as to how we identify what we're going to audit. So this year we did a lot of outreach to the public through surveys, we surveyed employees. We had talked to all the department directors. We talked to all the council members and the mayor. We talked amongst ourselves, right? Because we see a lot as auditors and we're interfacing with members of the public and employees. And our whistleblower hotline. We get a lot of complaints in there. Most of them are not fraud, waste, or abuse, but they do reveal things that are not working. So from all of that, we this year, for the first time pursuant to Measure X, published our audit annual work plan, and it's online. And the next slide, I think, well, it's going to be the slide after. So we've told the public these are the audits we plan to conduct. These are the ones that are currently underway, like we're currently working on. Development Services Fund, which has been happening for quite some time. The objectives have changed over time a bit as the city has experienced some changes and our office has experienced some changes too. There used to be, the objective of this audit was to identify why is the Development Services Fund balance so large? Because it's supposed to be a program whereby people pay for services that, like, the fees are the same as the services that the city provides, but the balance for that fund is huge. However, now it's forecast to not very big at all. So now the objective is going to be just explaining the balance of the Development Services Fund. We're deep into that. We're going to publish that one soon. The new addition was the city's application to the state organized retail theft grant program. That was not in our work plan. I was shocked. We went to like the Art and Soul Festival as the city auditor's office to staff a table to be communicating to the public. Everybody was so angry about the fact that the city missed that deadline for the organized retail theft grant that the state was providing. And we were just bombarded with requests to audit this. and even from within the city hall, so the city administrator even wanted us to audit, everybody wanted us to audit this, and it is a really high risk area when we consider how much grant funding is going to mean to the city, with our pretty routine fiscal challenges, so that's something that we're auditing. It's almost, that one's also almost done, so stay tuned. Pay equity, there were some pretty high profile, complaints about, the pay disparities or alleged pay disparities, particularly facing women and women of color in City Hall. They've, actually turned into lawsuits. We received money from the city council to do this audit. And so we are working with a couple of really talented graduate students at the Golden School of Public Policy at UC Berkeley to do like a really quantitative analysis of pay disparities, to the objective to determine whether or not they actually exist or not. City payments of another late addition, there's an organization that the city is providing grant funding to. We received multiple complaints about this organization through our whistleblower hotline. And upon investigating, we became very concerned about the controls in place at the city, in terms of holding this organization accountable to make sure that the money that the city was providing was being used for the intended purpose. And we became concerned about the merits of the services that this organization was providing. So we're auditing it. It was initially an investigation and now it's an audit. And I don't want to. But it will become known when we do publish the report. We will name the organization.
When do you think that report will come out?
We provided the organization with March as our target date, so we're really getting for March. Yeah, so stay tuned for that. Library services, you know, another two different, actually, the library has been a beneficiary of 3 ballot measures over the years, and they require the city auditor to verify that money is being spent in accordance with the legislation. So we're currently auditing that one, and that one is actually almost done. So that one's also coming up very soon.
That's something I see repeated during many of the measures is that.
Do you want to speak into the,
I can just yell.
well, they can't hear you on
I'll
Zoom.
paraphrase. the
Okay.
question.
Library, homeless. And there's one other, and I can't remember right off, but those two are in several different measures, and I'm wondering, is that just sweetener that's, who gets all these things combined into these measures to make it fine, who's in charge of it?
So there's a question about all our ballot measures and how some of them have multiple objectives and that touch on multiple services like libraries and homelessness, right? Or another example that's fresh in my mind is the Measure Q, which is Parks, Recreation Facilities, Homelessness Services, Litter Reduction, Water Quality Act. It's like a lot of stuff that is in one ballot, right?
Parks is the other one, right?
Right, so parks, right? So there's a lot, and you know, it really depends because some of those ballot measures are sponsored by organizations, like advocacy organizations, support organizations. And some of them are proposed within, you know, City Hall. So really, it really depends. I think I've never been involved in, you know, forming any of these legislation or the ballot measures. But I'd imagine there's some care paid to making sure that you have the right things that Oaklanders care about. Like, if you have parks and homelessness services, that's a pretty, people care about one of those.
Right, they're sweeteners.
Yeah, so I would imagine that probably has something to do with it. What's
It's
viable?
like a Christmas tree and for the federal government when they're putting something through Congress.
No, yeah,
They
right.
hang things on. They
Yeah.
hang everything,
Yeah,
so it will pass somehow.
We actually had a very, one of our most vocal gadflies at City Hall was upset about that as it related to Measure X. So that charter, the good governance charter amendment that I've been referring to throughout this presentation has every evidence like term limits. Then it also identifies minimum staffing levels for the city auditor, salary for the city auditor. It's a lot in one piece of legislation. I wish I knew, but I can only say. Okay, so these are the ones that are planned. We talked about what's underway. Citywide personnel investigation processes also related to that pay equity audit. We received money for this one. How is the city, well, the objective would be to assess the city's citywide, like how complaints are handled. We're not gonna be looking at individual complaints, but look at the city handling of personnel investigations in the city. Emergency response time, something that hit our queue, and I think it's pretty self-explanatory, like identifying, probably lending more transparency to that issue of what happens when people are calling in for emergencies, and identifying ways that, well, seeing how well we're really doing, that's a transparency piece, and identifying ways to reduce response times. I don't think that's a controversial statement because I think most people agree. Even from my personal experience, that response times aren't great.
Does this include 911 and how long it takes someone to answer 911?
So, good question, because it's intentionally ambiguous, because these are the planned audits. We don't really have, we had go through a whole process to identify the individual, like the specific objectives of our audit. They often start really broadly like this, emergency response times, and we develop objectives based on our gathering of all the information we get initially. So we're getting to know the program as well as we can. And from that, risks emerge, right? When we're out in the field, talking to staff, looking at records, studying budgets, we identify, oh, yikes, okay, these are the areas that might really, that we should hone in on. We haven't yet done that for any of these audits, except for the one I just mentioned, the personnel investigation process, because that was actually given to us from the city council at their request. But we don't know yet what the scope of the emergency response times is.
So in the personnel one you just mentioned, you're already working on that, and is that included?
We are not yet working on it, but we will be. We anticipate starting before the end of this fiscal year, that ends June 30th. Yeah, the emergency response times, it could take a lot of, but we just don't know. It depends on what we find during, we call it preliminary survey, and we're finding the audit.
So why does it take so long for emergency response?
Okay, so the question was, why does it take long for emergency response? I really don't know. Yeah, that's something, and that's something, so an example, so with the previous question about you know, what the scope is, or is this going to include like the timeliness of like the phone,
They answer the phone.
answering the phones? Like we literally, like when we started audit, we try to learn everything we can about the program, but right now we don't know anything about it. So, but the police and fire, they should be able, they would know the answer to that question, hopefully.
Just a question about the audit process and having an outside department looking inside other departments. Because most of my life has been in outside business, nurse practitioner, and for a variety of compliance, but also risk management. We did not have our quotes city auditors take on certain roles. We had other designated people because of the legal issues. I'm trying to understand how this audit process in Oakland works. It's not clear to me how other agencies, or let's say gaps, non-compliance, works with your group? Do you hand it off, or are there other agencies that come in also? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so, and you can confirm if I'm understanding when I try to paraphrase. So the idea that the auditors, as the independent auditor, we're going into these various departments and, assessing them, right? And a lot of these departments have really specialized, they're specialized in their specific, maybe city, state, and federal regulations that they would have to adhere to. And who are we as auditors with our generalist degrees being able to opine or provide findings on this, and how much coordination goes into, how much coordination is there with other like regulatory bodies perhaps? And
So you do handoffs for federal or state legal requirements versus institutional issues for funding. And that's where I'm trying to clarify roles and responsibilities.
right, so
So
there's,
that gaps that happen that really aren't your fault.
Right.
Can be handled within your scope. How does that get addressed?
right, so there are a lot of, city operations that are being that audited by federal and state entities. A lot of our community development block grant monies, for example, the feds are all over that. The feds are all over a lot of the programs that the city is providing, just to often the objectives of those audits are to ensure that you're meeting the federal guidelines. The same is the case with the state. And so the state is always in there. When we go in to audit a program, we collect those audits to inform our work. And we try to get maximum of efficiency by not necessarily, like that factors into our risk assessment. If we know, for instance, that the state of California is in a department with these very specific objectives and they've done recent audits, then we'll probably pick another area to. I mean, within that program, right? But yeah, that happens, and we'll also, so we'll scope our audits out of that, but we've also referred matters to, actually it's been law enforcement, especially through our whistleblower, investigations. Because we're not law enforcement, but we find that potential embezzlement or, something that the district attorney's office, public integrity unit would be better served handling, or the FBI, we will definitely just refer those matters to. Is that?
If I can chime in here, there were several of us that are in this room that were at the public safety meeting this last Tuesday, and they had a staffing report there. And to go to Cheryl's comment about 911, they had a graph of how long it takes for the calls to be answered. And between April, May, and June, it doubled the length of time. In some cases, it was like 600 minutes that it took to be answered 911. So this is probably something I'm sure you're going to be looking into, because that is in the staffing report from OPD. And just looking back at previous audits, back when Chief Kirkpatrick was here, they were talking about 911 issues and trying to hire people even then. So, there's a consistent issue with human resources and not hiring in an efficient manner. And then I think we also saw that Johnny had a report recently that there were 1,000 people that had applied for the 911 operator job and were never even contacted this last year. So nobody was contacted. So go get a Michael.
The vacancy issue, even like the vacant positions, even within our mission critical functions in the city, that's like been the top concern. That kind of rose near the top when we surveyed folks. and it's something. It's gotta be something new.
So the question is, as far as this has something to do with what you're talking about, 911 in the sense of crime. I've been calling the governor of the state for I don't know how long to get the status of the crime situation. And everybody keeps telling me, no, they don't know how to handle the situation of, getting people's needs met, like if they get the car smashed, or they're trying to chase people, down the street. But now they've hired, how many CHP to come and do that kind of work?
120.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know why, for some reason, I feel like this crime has escalated to such a great point that, I mean, it's a no-brainer that if I was the governor or the mayor or whatever, I would be calling the National Guard. And I just want to know why they haven't been called, that's all.
Now okay, so the question is, at what point, well, why is it that, there hasn't been calls made to the National Guard, to supplement our police services here in the city of Oakland to address the crime crisis? Recently, Governor Newsom brought in those California Highway Patrol officers, to assist, right? I believe it was for 5 days though, right? It's.
What?
Was
Yeah,
it? Was it?
Was
Was it? Yeah, they're gone.
They're not gone.
They're not gone. Are they still here?
They're gonna be doing.
a lot of that was like 7 or 5 days.
Okay,
They're gonna
so they're
be
still-
doing Random, at times we don't know,
Okay,
the same type of targeted.
okay. So like with that, I don't know the answer to that because that is definitely a decision that our executive, which is in Oakland, the mayor. And something that the legislative arm of our government, the city council would be advocating, right? We would just be, as the auditors, we would look after those kinds of decisions are made to assess how that they worked, right? But I would imagine there's, just as an Oaklander, there's trade-offs for those kinds of decisions, right? So we have a police commission that sets policies for how the OPD is going to conduct its work in the city of Oakland. Questions that would have to be confronted. Or like, what kind of, are we, as a city of, are the CHP going to be deferring to those policies, or are they gonna be doing what they generally do throughout the state? Would the National Guard defer to the city of Oakland's, city-specific policies, or are they going to be doing what they do? Right, so I think there's some considerations that would have to be made. That fortunately, the city auditor is not gonna be tasked with making.
Different scope.
Yeah, that's a different.
But if we have a place like the National Guard in certain areas where there's sort of a high crime, like down College Avenue right now. I mean, I would think that would scare, this is just mine. I would think that it just frighten a criminal. If he saw a guy in a tank and a camouflage suit parked on a corner, oh, I gotta go to another place. And then, oh, I go to another place and there's another guy. And then, oh my God, there's another tank. I mean,
For sure.
I know we're not having a riot, but this is pretty close to it.
Yeah, those are difficult. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know really what to say about that. Whether or not the city of Oakland, should, how urgent the problem is and what should be done to address this crime crisis. That's kind of something that, we're lucky as a city auditor's office, we don't have any kind of, jurisdiction. We're watching and, maybe after the fact, we will be able to provide transparency around how effective those efforts were. And then we would be using to judge the effectiveness, the city's own policies, right? Or in statistics, right? The crime go down. Where the city's policies followed You know, how much did it cost? Was it cost effective? Those are the kinds of things we will look into.
How quickly did something like that happen? Like if they wanted to make an assessment of the CHP?
Oh.
If it was effective, right? Because they plan to do more of those. They're not gonna tell us when, right, or where, they're just gonna happen. I think they said with about half the number, like 60 officers. How do we tell if it's worth it?
Yeah, so the question, yeah, that's a good question. Well,
And how
it's a-
quickly
It's a
we
hard
tell-
question for me to answer, but yeah, the question is, if we did hypothetically want to assess the effectiveness and of the most recent CHP intervention here at the city of Oakland, how long would something like that take? It really would depend on the scoping of it, right? So like, sometimes our audits, the scope is just like, well, how much did this cost, right? And that's something that would be easier to answer than like, well, how much did it cost? What were, how many arrests were made and how many arrests were made and how many of those resulted in prosecutions? And, you know, what was, you know, comparing and contrasting what the CHP did with the Oakland Police Department during a similar time. It really would depend on the scale and scope of that kind of. But our work does, I would say it does take some time. Because we cannot be wrong about anything that we publish and abide by government auditing standards. It's really, really annoying often. But we are very, very meticulous in planning our audits and conducting our field work steps and in making sure that everything's accurate. And we have to coordinate. So with audits, they're different from investigations in that when we're doing audits, we are required to work with the audited entities, and we're never gotcha in audits. We're working collaboratively with them, or at least I shouldn't say that. We share what our findings are before we publish, and we share with them what our recommendations are, and we get their buy-in on those recommendations.
So all your reports, I assume, are published online.
All of our performance audits are published online. Yes.
So this schedule here is for 2023, middle of February, 2024. Are you doing all these at one time, or are you going down the list? Or, and how
Well,
big is your staff?
We only have 7.5 full-time equivalents. So we are really lean right now and but that's been a focus of mine too. We are currently recruiting 3 positions. I hope that they go through because right now, the city is facing another dire budget situation, but these have not started yet. Then the previous slide. So these are ones that are in the queue for 20. These are in the queue, but these are the ones that are currently underway. And
Also, if you go to the North Hills or the open forum posting, I had a link there to all of the audits that have been done. So you can go through, open them up, take a look. If it's about 911, it'll say so. If it's about the sewer fees, it'll say so. So you can kind of pick and choose what you want to read about.
yeah, and I should also plug, we're doing a recommendation follow-up report right now. So all the recommendations that we've made over the last 10 years, we are identifying the status of those recommendations, whether or not they're implemented, partially implemented, or not implemented. And providing a summary as to what needs to be done for them to be implemented. We are currently working within the city hall, sharing our preliminary results of that with the responsible departments, but we will be publishing our first ever recommendation follow-up report. So that's gonna be key too. So even if we're not doing audits, if we're actively working to, get the recommendations that we made over the years implemented, that's super important.
Yeah, I'll give you an example why it's in this background. We live in the hills, you'll live in the hills, and the geology of the hills is quite different from the flat. But Oakland public works, whatever it is, doesn't do anything. Well, around 2017, I noticed the drainage pipe was, not connected. And I almost could do it myself, but I reported to the city. This drainage pipe, I have pictures and I documented some next door. And I asked this, I went up to, reported to, whatever, C-Click fix. And I said, could someone please connect these pipes? Well, what the city did is they sent this to the Parkwoods and explained the Parkwood needed to do. Well, the Parkwood said they wouldn't, and so it was a standoff, and the city did nothing. Well, if you look right now, the whole tunnel road is collapsing. The city has put, sheet on it, I have pictures. Tunnel road is cracking now, and there's been a huge slide. Because the city didn't do anything to do it. And there are sections on tunnel road already that are collapsing, it's only one lane. And the city doesn't do maintenance. And you report it to Public Works, and they refuse to do it. And then the city collapses, and they say they have no money, and they have to take emergency roads, or people up high on tunnel road have to drive with one lane. And an example on Charing Cross, after the fire, they put drainage and did fine. Well, it's collapsing now. And you can see the water and you can see that the guardrails are falling down. But no matter who, whatever you report, nothing is done. And you can see the road is collapsing. And soon Charing Cross, where it is on the hill section, will fall down and there's gonna be a crisis. And the city's gonna spend all the money on that rather than address the issue with the refuse. And this is a traditional, the Public Works does not address that we're in the hills. And how do we get to them to do it if they refuse?
Okay,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. So I'm just, can I paraphrase?
Sure.
So there was an example provided here, about, the city not being diligent in responding to points about, infrastructure concerns like, the drainage pipe, the 311 reports of a malfunctioning drainage pipe. And, I guess there was just lots of inaction over time, and you were told that there was coordination that was needed with another agency, and then time went by and it worsened, and then the city ultimately ended up having to shore it up after the conditions deteriorated. Very costly shore ups, I'd imagine, and yeah, that's a common concern throughout Oakland that I've been hearing. Frankly, it's yeah, I mean, and I think you started your comments by saying this is why I'm not going to use the B word, but you said that's why Oakland is bankrupt.
Well, I think that this is an example. While our roads, we have roads that are literally, it's like the complete deterioration. And they won't be fixed for another 10 or 15 years. You spend all this money on this emergency, and they ignore us.
Well, I think that they're certainly hearing this. I was at a neighborhood council meeting recently, and we were complaining about the 311 issues and the fact that even in the comments, if you are following up yourself on a report you made, nobody ever reads the comments. So the city administrator was there, Joe DeVries. He was surprised. So, let's give Michael some time here. I saw him taking notes when you were making your comments, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you, because really there's nothing, I think I'm reluctant to give advice on that specific circumstance, but as an auditor, this may come across as lame, right? But we're taking all these concerns and documenting them and try to figure out, okay, how can we look into these matters that people have been bringing to us?
Yeah, I have documentation that I would love to send it.
Well,
to someone, and no one to send it to.
There's lots of, I have 1,000 311 calls that have never been fixed. So Barry.
Well, to put a finer point on it, Michael, might there be a 311 audit in your future as it pertains to public works?
Great. Thank you, Barry. It's like we were in cahoots or something, because if you go to the next slide. This is just, okay, this slide summarizes areas warranting up, right?
Oh, my God.
Everything, and it turns out that Oaklanders are really upset about what we're providing. Oaklanders feel poorly about the quality of services. Again, like, when we went out to the public and we surveyed them, this is like only not maybe a tenth of the suggestions. Okay, so there's lots of things in there, and that's why when we're doing, we call it risk assessment, or audit planning. We're really trying to, pick the audits that are going to cover the issues that are most pressing to Oaklanders, but then also figure out ways to scope those so that we can try to get the biggest bang for buck, you know. Oh, you see that Oak 311 is on there. We did an investigation actually into that touched on Oak 311 issues. But the allegation was that the contractor was getting paid but not really doing the work. And we couldn't substantiate fraud in that way, but what it was people felt that way because nothing was getting done. They were calling 311, and I lived where I live. I personally called 311 on abandoned vehicles that were left right in front of my house. And literally, like, nothing happens, right? Or so it's very frustrating. It's very frustrating.
I think there's some policies too, because I just learned that in some cases, they will not tow a burned out vehicle that is abandoned.
Yeah, and then.
So let's get a new policy or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and then to this gentleman's concern about that, like what to do. I ended up being creative. I did not invoke my title at all. But I did elevate with my council member. I knew, like who the police at the time, like the illegal, well, the abandoned autos was covered by the police department. And I used my tenacity and my knowledge to make stuff happen. And that's really sad that people have to do that, right?
Well, unfortunately, we might have a council member who does something, but I actually did go to Dan Child and ask him to do something, and he ignored us. And I've actually even contacted our new council member, I can't.
John,
remember her name. And she's done nothing. And I think they're afraid of dealing with these agencies. I think from talking to them, they're afraid that council has passed legislation that they can't communicate with these agencies, and somehow we don't have a way of doing this. There's no way of contact. If 311 doesn't work, we have no number to call. I mean, we should be able to call someone in the agency and find out why.
I agree. There should be accountability, right? Is that basically what you're saying?
And there's these departments have no accountability and no one to talk to. Who's that?
Okay, thank you. And should we move on with your program there before?
Oh, yeah.
Because we're always gonna have lots of questions.
Yeah, and this is your time, and I only have a couple more slides, and then I'm happy to just have a conversation. This is just like a slide to illustrate again. Lots of ideas have come forward as far as what the city auditor should be looking into. And then it's just, I'm really happy to be here. I am I'm the acting city auditor, but I haven't been, this is the first time I've been in this kind of a public role. So it's been fun to be able to get out and learn the city from this process of running for city auditor, but then also being the representative of the office. And I welcome the opportunity to get in front of you again, or if you refer me to other folks. I welcome the opportunity to remind people that the city auditor's office exists, the city auditor exists, and this is what we do. Open to hearing from you what you think that the city auditor should be spending, our very limited resources are looking into.
What's your email address?
My email, okay, so we have a city auditor at oaklandca.gov. I also have my cards, so those of you in the room, they're back in that table. M Houston, Houston spelled just like the city, M as in Michael, M Houston at oaklandca.gov. And if you have your phones, I hope you can make that QR code work by just taking out your cell phone and taking a photo of that. Welcome you to sign up for our newsletters and connect with us on social media and check out our website where we have our reports published.
Yeah, that scan me doesn't work.
For me,
Oh,
Well, I think it's because
I
we
just-
have.
No, that's not the reason.
Okay.
It's because the website doesn't come in English.
oh, really?
does for me. I
Well,
just did it.
it did it for me, and then it gave me a list of
Right.
things. No, I tried it just now.
Okay, so for you, oaklandauditor.com.
Okay,
Good
but that link is.
to
doesn't
know.
come in English.
Good to know.
Find it for me.
It does, Brian has it on his right now, so.
Well, I have it in our meeting right here, and I can show you that.
No,
So-
no way.
Okay, are we finished?
And those are that's the end of my prepared comments. This is your time, so.
I have a question concerning public safety. And relative to what might be investigated. And in some cases, like the rape kits that are let sit on a shelf. And any of those important information that the rape kits have are being wasted. I think that is certainly part of public safety, something we ought to think about. Law enforcement should require, how many have been not processed. And that we should know about it. Community policing, we've been wanting to have community resource officers. And why can we not keep community resource officers? Yes, I know we're understaffed, etc. But there should be some way to at least, and we're gonna say we need to support Michael and his office with advocating for these things. We can no longer just sit and complain. We have to do something ourselves. You don't have to show up at the meetings downtown, but as some of us have found out, you can park in an underground parking lot that is secure. And so you may, or figure out how to get on their Zoom. I still haven't. Catherine.
Michael, how many, given the number of audits that you've undertaken a year, what's the percentage of those that are mandated by the charter versus those that you elect to pursue? What's the split?
Okay, yeah, good question. So the question was, how many of our audits are the risk-based ones that we've identified as needing to be conducted based on what's going on in the city and how many of them are versus how many of them mandated? It's been about 50-50.
Yeah, and that's been consistent, no?
Yes, it's been consistent. Now, but the one thing that we have done, so examples of our mandated audits include the Police Commission and Community Police Review Agency and the Measure Q, the Parks Facilities, one that we just conducted. We did take that opportunity to dig a little deeper. Since we're going to be spending this, audit resources, we might as well ask some interesting questions too, besides just check box kind of questions that we were required to answer for the municipal and city charter. So it's about 50-50. One of my areas of focus will be how can we streamline the mandated audits, or maybe even explore ways to those out when prudent. So because there's so many risk areas. You saw, I mean, all the ideas that are coming here and all those ideas that we had in the slide. We'd like to really focus more of our resources on the risk.
To that point, are there other cities that outsource some of the more routine projects?
You know what, that's a good question. If there are other cities that outsource that function, I'm not, and we are really tuned into the work that
Yeah,
the auditors from throughout the country are doing. We're a close-knit profession, local government auditors. Very few of them have as many mandated audits. I mean, and every time, you know, there's a ballot measure, I think it's kind of a compliment, I guess, right?
you get
Because,
another one, don't you?
and we have, there you go, right? There's always a new ballot measure and often they have this audit provision. And it's, so we're gonna have to be really creative because the list of mandates, it keeps growing and our resources are not growing proportionally.
I know I had that on my list too, Catherine. If we could partner with other cities that maybe are having the same issue or have been successful in this area. You know, there's lots of cities that have found a way around, everybody is having budget issues, but if we can find some partners, perhaps.
You couldn't keep ballot measures forced to be able to fund the order too, if they require the public. Why can't the city charter require them to provide funds? For order, if
So-
they require.
That's a good question. So the question is, you know, the ballot measures, could they fund audits? Could they include language in there that funds audits? And the Measure Q audit actually did have some language there that, but it wasn't. It was, one of our findings was that there wasn't actually they weren't conducting an audit with the budget audit amount, I mean, with the allocation, without an allocation. So our recommendation was, well, you really should use that allocation to conduct audits. But the audits that were required was ambiguous, right? Because there's audits like revenue and expenses, the kind of like purely financial audits. And then the ones that specified that the city auditor must look at them. None of those have been, have provided any funding for the city auditor's office. So that would be a great idea if you were to be part of, you know, these groups that are bringing these ballot measures forward and to negotiate getting those in, that would be awesome.
But could the city require that part of the charter that if you require this of the city auditor, you must provide funds? I mean, that should be a requirement if you use these properties. That has to be guidelines. That could be one guideline that the city should require.
I would love if that were the case, if there was a requirement that, you know, mandated audits actually be funded, that would be awesome. I don't know, I don't know constitutionally, like, I'm not an attorney, I don't know if that's something that could work, but I like that.
Measure X you referred to. I remember conversations with Courtney when that was being drafted. And there was hope that there would be like a number in Measure X that said that if the city's budget is X, the city auditor must be funded to 0.5% or 1.5% of X. Did that actually make it into Measure X?
No.
It did not.
So the question is about Measure X, just for the people on Zoom. The minimum staffing for the office of the city auditor. I think over the years, there have been different proposals for making sure that the city auditor's office was sufficiently staffed so that we could conduct our mandated responsibilities, right? And Measure X, what ended up in Measure X was a specific number of full-time equivalent staff, and it was 14. A really, like a perfect scenario in terms of ensuring adequate staffing in the city auditor's office would be something that is something similar to what's in place in the city county of San Francisco, where the city auditor's office has a fixed percentage of like funding. So, you know, and we're not subject to the budgeting of the city administration and the mayor.
But that
Because
didn't make it into Measure X.
that was not in measurements. And so the 14, and I should add, and I think I said this earlier, but the 14 minimum staffing that Measure X specifies is subject for suspension given the extreme fiscal emergency,
Which has been declared.
which has been declared. And seems, I mean, I'm only speculating, but I don't think that the financial prospect is bleak for the foreseeable future.
Oh, okay, Sheila.
Given the present budget, how many of this long list would you be able to audit?
We are,
One, is it two?
That
Is
is
it
a-
all mandates? stuff?
yeah. Yeah, that's a good question, which was, how many of our proposed audits are we going to actually be able to conduct? And we are intentionally, it's hard to tell because we haven't scoped out those audits yet, as I mentioned earlier, with some of these like emergency response times. That could be a beast, right? Or it could be something that has real specific kind of objectives that we would be able to knock out really quickly. It's hard to tell whether or not an audit is going to require 800 hours, like staff hours, which is kind of a really easy audit for us, or if it's going to require 1,400 hours or 2,400. It's hard for us to project that. But we have, and I have it, well, I'd like for it to be that we conduct 2 audits per auditor per year. But then we, on average, have about 2.5 auditors assigned to every audit. I was trying to be transparent there, and in doing so became not very transparent, but it takes us a long time to conduct audits. If you look at our website, you see that I think we conducted 3 last year.
You connected one.
3, we completed, yeah, so.
Once again, if you go back and you pull up the link to the audits. I had an interesting evening last night reading up on some of these, and the January 13th, 2022 audit on police overtime goes back to 2019. And the fact that there were a lot of things that were suggested by the auditor and that none of them were implemented. None of them were implemented that I could read here, and that we need to perhaps contact the city administrator who is supposed to implement these. How would you suggest we do that?
Thank you for that, because that is something that, again, somebody recommendations that how can we implement them? And I do think it's gonna have to be like political pressure. That's one of the reasons why our reports are published publicly, because we want the public to see what we found and have everyone see, look, these are important recommendations. And theoretically, that's supposed to have folks knocking on doors and applying pressure to the decision makers to implement the recommendations. We are, as I said earlier, we are in the process of finishing our first ever recommendation follow-up report. So we've done audit follow-ups or follow-up audits on specific issues, like we did one for police overtime. But this one is going to be a follow-up report on all the recommendations that we made over the last 10 years. And we're going to present that and call out certain either low-hanging fruit or particularly important recommendations that have yet to be implemented and we think should be implemented immediately. So
We have
we're
to start somewhere.
yeah, we have to, yeah, and I would like for people to be really passionate about impressing upon the city council members that they think it's important for these recommendations to be implemented as well. Because the reality is, we don't have any kind of authority over the, running of the city. Our power is really just kind of publishing, reporting out on what's not working and making these recommendations. But we really do need we rely on the public to really make the city accountable.
Do you know what percentage get implemented?
And we haven't yet done the recommendation follow-up report, but we're gonna issue those statistics. So you'll be able to see the recommendations by the department, whether or not those recommendations touch on, effectiveness or efficiency or equity or compliance matter. And, whether or not they're implemented, partially implemented or not implemented.
Have you ever audited the city administrator's office and how they function and why they do it, don't implement the recommendations?
So the question was if our office has conducted an audit of the city administrator's office and identified why they haven't implemented recommendations. And we haven't. But yeah, we have not. As far as I know dating back to Courtney Ruby's first term, there hasn't been anything like that that's been conducted.
It was pretty interesting to, and to your point about the city administrator. Because it's the city administrator and the mayor, that ultimately are supposed, but mainly the city administrator, which kind of surprised me. And I pulled up what their job requirements are. And if you take a look at that, you can Google everything nowadays. It's important to hold them accountable, just like we're talking about. There's a sewer tax fee or a sewer service charge that there was an investigation done February 10th, 2022. And way back when this started, there was an annual fee increase of 16% that started in 2013. And they found that there was no need for that increase in the sewer tax fee because they were not using all of the money that was coming in from the sewer tax fee. But the overage, that increase was being then transferred into the general fund
Of the city.
of the city. And so that's on the website. You can read all about this. So what is that? Maybe by now 73 million? Where's that money gone? So, and because there was no reference to the 10% franchise fee in the legislation that changed the fee being able to be transferred into the general fund. So, and I was asleep at the wheel, obviously. So that was a long time ago, and none of the current city council people were on the council then, but it was an interesting group, and you can look that up. So.
Thanks.
Another question.
How often do you meet with the city manager or whatever?
So I meet with the city administrator on a monthly basis. When I become the permanent city auditor, I plan to have more formal introductions with everyone. I'll be initiating meetings, just to introduce myself and find out what do they see from what do they think that they need from the city auditor's office. And also plug these outstanding recommendations. So.
Are you just all stunned or is this enough?
Thank you, Michael.
So it's 3:25, and if anybody wants to stay around, I think Michael probably can for a little while. If you want to look at any of these investigations that I have up here, if you want to see the how what the mayor is supposed to be doing and what the city administrator is supposed to be doing, I have that up here as well. So thank you very much. We appreciate your candor. And so you want us to start writing, is that what you want us to do?
Writing or showing up to these meetings or just raising.
Do you want,
Frustration.
you want city council meetings? Do you want committee meetings?
I think all of the above. Yeah, there's a lot, I mean, there's just been a lot, our office has been really busy for a long time. And I think we can use all the help we should get.
I think they're so underappreciated. And I have been lax, not reading, not being informed about what's happening in the city and look what's happening. So, and just to kind of backtrack a little bit with OPD and CHP, we know that the policies within OPD need to be tweaked, as we shall say, as far as pursuing at some time. CHP does not have the same policies, which is why there's some benefit to having them here. There is a conflict, as Michael went through quite well. You know, we're gonna try and make this work for everybody because we want to feel safe. That's why we pay taxes and stuff. Okay. So thank you. Any other questions here? No?
No,
Okay.
not on my.
Thank you.
No.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. No,